The air in the exclusive Las Vegas poker room felt thick, almost heavy, with something more than just cigar smoke and expensive perfume. It was tension, a kind you could practically taste. All eyes were on the table, specifically on the man at the head of it, Mr. Lee. He wasn't just any high roller. He was a name whispered in hushed tones, a notorious Korean Mafia boss whose reputation preceded him like a dark cloud. Tonight, however, his focus wasn't entirely on the cards. His gaze kept drifting, sharp and possessive, to the woman sitting opposite him. Her name was Sarah. Sarah was a gifted mathematician, brilliant, but you wouldn't know it just from looking at her. Tonight she looked tired, her usual sharp focus a little dulled by the late hour and the immense pressure. Mr. Lee, with a smooth, almost predatory smirk, pushed his chips forward. The pile was staggering, an obscene amount of money. $100 million, he announced, his voice low, but carrying clearly across the table. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers, quickly stifled. But then he added, his eyes locking onto Sarah's. "And I'm not betting on the cards tonight. I'm betting on you, Sarah." A different kind of silence fell, deeper, more unsettling. People shifted, uncomfortable. Mr. Lee leaned back, a picture of casual dominance. "I intend to win you, Sarah. A life of luxury, protection, anything you could ever want, all in exchange for your loyalty, to me and to my organization." It was an offer that wasn't an offer, a declaration of ownership, a gilded cage presented as a gift. The implication hung in the air. He wasn't just gambling money, he was gambling her freedom, her very self. She was to be trapped, a prize, a possession. The shock on Sarah's face was clear, a flicker of fear in her eyes. But then, something else entered them. A spark. A strange, almost imperceptible nod. Barely a twitch of her head, and then a faint, calculated smile. It was so subtle, most people in the room missed it, or dismissed it as a nervous reaction. But it was there. A plan. She had a plan. The dealer, a veteran of countless high-stakes games, looked visibly uncomfortable, but pushed the chips towards Mr. Lee. He had won. The game was over, and by his twisted logic, he had won Sarah too. As he reached across the table, his fingers extending towards her hand, Sarah subtly shifted. Her movement was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to avoid his touch. Her eyes, however, met his directly. There was a glint there, a flash of defiance that contradicted the faint smile from moments before. It was a look that spoke volumes, a silent promise of something more to come. A thought echoed in the mind of anyone who truly understood the subtle power dynamics at play tonight. Some victories are merely the prelude to a greater loss. Mr. Lee believed he had achieved his goal, that he had claimed his prize. But Sarah's expression suggested a much deeper, more dangerous game was still in play. What were her true intentions? What fate awaited Mr. Lee, who thought he had just won everything? Before we continue with Sarah's incredible story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Sarah's story didn't start in the neon glow of a Las Vegas casino, but in the quiet, tree-lined streets of a suburban town in the United States. Her childhood was far removed from the high-stakes world she now found herself in. It was a normal upbringing, stable and modest, without much flash or excess. Her parents, both teachers, believed strongly in the power of education and hard work. Their home was filled with books, not expensive gadgets, and dinner-table conversations often revolved around current events or academic puzzles. This quiet life, however, fostered a keen intellect in young Sarah. From a very early age, it was clear Sarah wasn't like other kids. While her friends were playing with dolls or video games, Sarah found her comfort, her escape, in numbers. Mathematics wasn't just a subject in school. It was a language she understood better than any other. Complex equations were like intricate puzzles she was born to solve, and probability theories felt like secrets the universe was whispering just to her. She'd spend hours in her room, not on social media, but poring over textbooks, her brow furrowed in concentration, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips when a particularly challenging problem finally yielded its solution. This deep connection to mathematics formed the very core of who she was, shaping her identity and her dreams for the future. Despite her undeniable brilliance, Sarah carried a quiet burden, a vulnerability that few knew about. Her family, while loving, was not wealthy. Her mother had a chronic illness that required expensive medication and frequent doctor visits, and her younger siblings were still in school, their futures dependent on her success. The financial strain was a constant heavy weight on her shoulders. She dreamt of using her mathematical prowess for good, for something legitimate and impactful. She imagined a career in academia, perhaps groundbreaking research where her mind could truly flourish and contribute to the world. But that path felt long, slow, and uncertain when her family's needs were so immediate. The pressure to provide, to ensure their stability, gnawed at her, often keeping her awake at night. It was this desperate need for financial stability that inadvertently opened the door to Mr. Lee's world. Initially, it was just small-time card games, a way to make a quick buck, using her understanding of odds and patterns to supplement her meager income from tutoring and part-time jobs. These games were a far cry from the glittering casino floors, held in dimly lit back rooms or hushed private residences. But each small win chipped away at her initial reluctance, making the allure of easy money harder to resist. The stakes slowly grew, and so did the names whispered around the tables. She heard about Mr. Lee, not as a direct threat then, but as a powerful figure in the gambling circuit. Someone whose influence touched everything. The underground gambling world, with its promise of quick solutions, began to slowly, almost imperceptibly, draw her in. It was a dangerous web, spun with threads of desperation and the intoxicating thrill of victory. What started as a desperate solution to her family's financial woes gradually became something more, something darker. Each time she sat at a table, she told herself it was temporary, just until she had enough to lift her family out of their struggles. But the web tightened with every game, every encounter, setting the stage for the dramatic confrontation that would eventually unfold in that exclusive Las Vegas poker room. The glitz and the high stakes of that final game were merely the culmination of a long, slow descent into a world she never intended to be a part of. A world orchestrated by the unseen hand of Mr. Lee. The first encounters Sarah had with people connected to Mr. Lee's organization were subtle. She didn't meet him right away, of course. It was always through intermediaries, smooth-talking men who seemed to appear out of nowhere at the underground games she frequented. They would watch her play, sometimes offering a quiet word of praise for her sharp mind, or a seemingly friendly tip about a better, higher-stakes game down the line. These weren't overt threats. They were invitations, veiled offers of help. They'd suggest she move up, play with bigger fish, promising access to games where her mathematical talent could truly shine and pay off in a big way. At first, these offers seemed like a blessing. They spoke of opportunities, of a chance to finally make enough money to take care of her family. They painted a picture of a world where her intelligence would be respected and rewarded. But these promises, like so many things in that world, were hollow. The help they offered slowly morphed into control. When she started winning consistently, they would subtly shift the rules, introduce new players, or change the stakes without much warning. It was never enough to make her quit, but just enough to keep her from getting too far ahead, always dangling the next big win just out of reach. She remembered one night particularly well. She had been on a winning streak, feeling confident, almost invincible. One of Mr. Lee's associates, a man named Kim with cold eyes and an even colder smile, approached her. He congratulated her, then suggested she join a private game. Bigger stakes, bigger rewards, Sarah. Your kind of game. He promised a fair table, top players, and a chance to double her recent earnings. She agreed, eager. But at that game, the cards seemed to turn against her more often than not. She noticed small things, a flicker in a dealer's eye, a slight hesitation before a card was dealt. It wasn't blatant cheating, not enough to call out without proof, but it was enough to drain her winnings, leaving her frustrated and just slightly in debt to the house, which, she later realized, was indirectly Mr. Lee's. It was a veiled humiliation, a way to show her that even her brilliant mind couldn't beat the system they controlled. Her intelligence, which she thought was her greatest asset, was being exploited, twisted to serve their purpose. This was how the web of deception was spun. Mr. Lee's network didn't need to use brute force initially. They were far more artful. They masterfully manipulated circumstances to create a sense of indebtedness in Sarah. Those rigged games weren't just about taking her money. They were about putting her in a precarious financial position. Each time she lost more than she expected, or when a promised payout was delayed for some obscure reason, the pressure mounted. She started taking out small loans from their associates, always with high interest, always with the understanding that she'd pay it back by playing more. It was a vicious cycle designed to make her more and more susceptible to their influence. They made her believe she needed them, that they were her only way out of the hole they had helped dig for her. The cumulative effect of these experiences was a slow, suffocating realization. Mr. Lee's grand gesture at the casino wasn't some sudden, dramatic play for a woman he'd just met. It was the culmination of years of calculated psychological and financial pressure. Every friendly offer, every manipulated game, every delayed payment, every subtle humiliation had been a step in his plan. He hadn't just won her at the poker table that night. He had been systematically cornering her, pushing her to her breaking point for a very long time. The $100 million bet was just the final public act of a long, drawn-out capture. It showed her and everyone else that he owned her, not with chains, but with debt and desperation. He thought he had her exactly where he wanted her, completely trapped. The atmosphere around Sarah, already heavy with the weight of her choices, became suffocatingly oppressive. The subtle manipulation she had endured in the gambling world now escalated into more direct demands from Mr. Lee's organization. Gone were the veiled suggestions. In their place came explicit instructions, appointments she couldn't miss, and expectations that felt less like requests and more like orders. She found herself constantly checking her phone, dreading the next message, the next summons. Every casual conversation with her new associates felt like an interrogation, each question probing for loyalty, for commitment to Mr. Lee's world. Her life, once governed by equations and academic pursuits, was now dictated by the whims of men who saw her as an asset to be managed. Her increasing involvement in the high-stakes gambling scene didn't go unnoticed by her peers in the legitimate academic world. Whispers followed her in the university hallways. Colleagues, once eager to collaborate, now offered stiff smiles and hurried excuses to avoid her. She felt their judgment in their averted gazes, in the sudden silences when she entered a room. The bright, promising mathematician was becoming the subject of cautious gossip, her reputation slowly tarnishing. Her family, too, noticed the change. Her mother, whose health was still fragile, saw the stress etched on Sarah's face, the dark circles under her eyes. Her siblings, usually so open, became quiet, sensing the unspoken tension that now surrounded Sarah. Their concern, meant to be supportive, only added to her growing sense of isolation. She couldn't explain the full truth without terrifying them, so she offered vague excuses, which only deepened the chasm between them. She felt utterly alone, misunderstood by those she loved most, and trapped by those who claimed to own her. Mr. Lee's true colors, once hidden beneath a veneer of charm and calculated generosity, began to show more clearly. The mask slipped. His interest in Sarah quickly morphed into something possessive and controlling. He started dictating her schedule, suggesting where she should live, even what she should wear. His calls became more frequent, his tone more demanding. He'd send expensive gifts, not as tokens of affection, but as reminders of her dependence, each one feeling like a chain rather than a gesture. He would appear unannounced at places he knew she frequented, his presence a constant, unsettling shadow. He didn't ask for her opinions. He stated his expectations. He saw her as a prize he had won, someone to be displayed and controlled, not a person with her own thoughts or desires. The idea of her having any freedom outside his influence seemed to infuriate him. This period was Sarah at her lowest point, a time of intense emotional turmoil. She felt completely trapped, suffocated by the choices she had made and by the relentless pressure from Mr. Lee and his organization. Every path forward seemed blocked. The debt, the threats, the watchful eyes of his associates. It all combined to create a cage she couldn't see a way out of. She would spend sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, her brilliant mind, usually so adept at solving complex problems, now unable to find a solution for her own predicament. The realization that escape seemed impossible was a heavy burden, pressing down on her spirit. She was a mathematician, a strategist, but even she couldn't calculate a way out of this intricate, dangerous web. The weight of her situation was immense, pushing her to the very edge of her endurance, just before everything was about to change. The weight of her situation was immense, pushing her to the very edge of her endurance, just before everything was about to change. The breaking point arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet, sickening thud. Sarah discovered a hidden ledger, not through an intentional search, but by a sheer stroke of luck during one of Mr. Lee's infrequent, careless absences from his private office. She had been tasked with organizing some financial documents, a benign cover for her continued involvement in his operations. Buried deep within a stack of mundane casino receipts, almost as an afterthought, was a small, leather-bound book. It was an old-fashioned thing, completely out of place in Mr. Lee's otherwise high-tech setup. Curiosity, a trait that had always driven her mathematical pursuits, compelled her to open it. What she found inside turned her stomach. It wasn't just a record of illegal gambling profits or shady deals. This ledger detailed how Mr. Lee's organization was systematically extorting money from small businesses in her old neighborhood, the very community that had nurtured her. It listed names she recognized: the corner grocery store owner, the family who ran the dry cleaner, even the small bakery where her mother bought her favorite pastries. More horrifyingly, it showed how these businesses were being pressured into selling their properties at ridiculously low prices, all part of a larger plan by Mr. Lee to buy up real estate and expand his legitimate-looking fronts. The cold, hard numbers laid out a pattern of calculated destruction, directly impacting the lives of people she cared about, people who were already struggling. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about protecting her home, her past, the innocent lives caught in his web. This devastating revelation was the catalyst. It shattered the last remnants of her fear and replaced it with a burning resolve. She wasn't just a victim. She was a mathematician, a strategist, and now she was a protector. Her mind, once paralyzed by despair, began to hum with renewed purpose. She meticulously photographed every page of the ledger, using a burner phone she had cleverly acquired months ago, anticipating a moment like this. Her hands trembled slightly, but her focus was absolute. This wasn't an impulsive act of defiance. It was the first step in a carefully planned, mathematically precise move towards liberation. She knew the risks were immense, but the thought of those familiar faces losing everything because of Mr. Lee fueled her courage. An unforeseen opportunity, almost too perfect to be true, presented itself shortly after. Mr. Lee, ever confident in his control, had recently acquired a new, state-of-the-art secure server for his most sensitive data. He bragged about its impenetrable firewalls and encryption. What he didn't realize was that his head IT specialist, a quiet young man named Kevin, was a former classmate of Sarah's from university. Kevin, a brilliant but socially awkward coder, had always held a quiet admiration for Sarah's intellect. He had noticed her distress, the way she seemed to shrink under Mr. Lee's watchful eye. One evening, while Sarah was working late in the office, Kevin, frustrated with a bug in the new system, grumbled about a backdoor that only he knew about, a developer's key he had built in for emergency access during setup. He mentioned it offhand, never thinking Sarah would pay attention, much less understand its significance. But Sarah did. Her mind instantly connected the dots. It was a tiny, almost invisible crack in Mr. Lee's fortress, a loophole he was completely unaware of. She seized upon it, not with force, but with the quiet precision of a surgeon. Over the next few nights, under the guise of extra work, Sarah used Kevin's unwitting hint to gain access to the server. She didn't just copy files. She meticulously cross-referenced the ledger's information with other digital records of Mr. Lee's operations, building an irrefutable case. She found evidence of money laundering, bribery, and even more sinister activities that reached far beyond her local community. The truth, ugly and extensive, began to unfold. Her actions, quiet and methodical, started to expose Mr. Lee's true nature, far beyond the petty manipulations she had endured. This moment was the turning point. It irrevocably altered the course of the story, not just for Sarah, but for everyone caught in Mr. Lee's shadow. The immediate aftermath of her actions was a dizzying mix of emotions. A wave of relief washed over Sarah, a feeling so potent it almost brought her to her knees. But it was quickly followed by a cold dread. She had struck a blow against a powerful man, and she knew he wouldn't take it lightly. Fear for her safety gnawed at her, a constant hum beneath her skin. Guilt, too, lingered, not for what she had done, but for the years she had allowed herself to be manipulated, for the time she had lost. The future stretched before her, a vast, uncertain landscape. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every unfamiliar face a potential danger. The initial triumph of her daring plan quickly gave way to the heavy weight of psychological pressure. She felt exposed, vulnerable, despite the careful planning. The impact on those around her was swift and varied. Some of her academic acquaintances, who had always viewed her involvement with the casino world with suspicion, now openly distanced themselves. Their fear of being associated with anything connected to Mr. Lee's organization was palpable. Whispers followed her, hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered a room. It was a painful reminder of the social isolation she had already begun to experience. Her family, however, reacted differently. Her mother, frail but fiercely protective, worried endlessly, her eyes filled with a new kind of fear that Sarah hadn't seen before. Her siblings, younger and more naive, were confused and scared by the sudden shift in their lives, the constant hushed phone calls, the look of strain on Sarah's face. But then, unexpected allies emerged. Kevin, the quiet IT specialist, after realizing the true extent of Mr. Lee's operations from Sarah's actions, felt a deep sense of responsibility. He reached out, offering his technical expertise and a safe place to hide a backup of the data. A small but significant act of defiance against a man he had once feared. A former colleague from her early days in research, a woman named Dr. Evelyn Reed, who had always admired Sarah's intellect, also stepped forward. Dr. Reed, a staunch advocate for justice, used her network to connect Sarah with legal aid and investigative journalists. Understanding the gravity of the situation and the cultural dynamics at play in America, where personal liberty and justice, though sometimes slow, were deeply valued. Mr. Lee's organization reacted with the predictable fury of a cornered beast. The intimidation attempts began almost immediately. Anonymous calls to her burner phone, chilling messages left on her old voicemail, even a slashed tire on her car, all designed to make her feel hunted. Misinformation was spread through the underground networks, painting Sarah as a traitor, a con artist, someone not to be trusted. There were direct threats too, veiled warnings delivered by menacing figures who suddenly appeared in places she frequented. The danger escalated quickly, turning her world into a constant state of alert. She had to move from her apartment, living out of a series of temporary, undisclosed locations, always looking over her shoulder. The deep psychological impact of these experiences began to take its toll. Sleep became a luxury, often interrupted by nightmares of Mr. Lee's cold eyes, or the fear of a knock on the door. The constant threat, the need for hypervigilance, left her perpetually exhausted. She found herself questioning every decision, every interaction. The trauma of her past with Mr. Lee, combined with the new reality of being hunted, etched lines of stress onto her young face. Yet, beneath the fear and exhaustion, a steely resolve hardened. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. This wasn't merely about survival anymore. It was about seeing it through, about ensuring that Mr. Lee's reign of terror truly ended. Her mathematical mind, though strained, still sought patterns, still calculated risks and probabilities, finding strength in the logic of her actions, even as her emotions screamed for peace. Her resilience, born from years of quiet struggle and intellectual discipline, was being tested like never before, but it held. The path to rebuilding her life was long and hard, but Sarah faced it with the same quiet determination she brought to complex equations. With Dr. Reed's help and Kevin's technical skills, she began working with a specialized unit within the FBI that focused on financial crimes and organized crime syndicates. Her unique blend of mathematical genius and intimate knowledge of Mr. Lee's operations made her an invaluable asset. She helped them decipher encrypted ledgers, predict money laundering patterns, and even identify key players in his network that law enforcement had never been able to touch. It was a new avenue to utilize her talents, one that finally aligned with her dream of using her intellect for legitimate good. The work was demanding, and the threat of retaliation from Mr. Lee's remaining loyalists was always present. But Sarah felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. Mr. Lee's downfall was as swift as it was comprehensive. The evidence Sarah provided, combined with the detailed digital trails Kevin had secured, painted an undeniable picture of his vast criminal empire. Federal agents raided his properties across several states, seizing assets, arresting his top lieutenants, and dismantling his operations piece by piece. The $100 million he had so casually gambled away became a symbol of his hubris, now serving as a stark reminder of his impending ruin. He was arrested during a high-stakes poker game, ironically, in a much less opulent setting than the one where he had won Sarah. The news reports were sensational, detailing the rise and fall of the Korean Mafia boss, a man once thought untouchable. His face, once smug and confident, was now etched with a mixture of disbelief and fury as he was led away in handcuffs. The narrative of his reign ended not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a jail cell door. Justice was achieved, not with a single dramatic act, but through a meticulous, calculated dismantling of his power. The legal victories were numerous, and the public exposure stripped him of any remaining influence. His criminal enterprise, built on fear and manipulation, crumbled under the weight of the truth. Sarah testified, her voice steady and clear, detailing years of coercion, manipulation, and the calculated psychological pressure he had exerted. Her testimony was crucial, painting a human face on the abstract charges of racketeering and money laundering. It made his crimes real, not just statistics. The judge, swayed by the overwhelming evidence and Sarah's compelling account, handed down a lengthy sentence, ensuring Mr. Lee would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Sarah emerged from the ordeal not unscathed, but undeniably stronger and more self-assured. The fear lingered sometimes, a ghost of her past, but it no longer defined her. She had faced down a powerful adversary, not with brute force but with her mind, her resilience, and her unwavering belief in justice. She continued her work with the FBI, eventually moving into a leadership role, developing secure systems for protecting vulnerable witnesses and tracking criminal finances. She even reconnected with her family, slowly rebuilding trust and healing old wounds. Her mother, seeing the peace in Sarah's eyes, finally understood her daughter's strength. The journey had been arduous, filled with moments of despair and terror, but it had also forged her into someone remarkable. Her story became a testament to the power of intellect, the quiet strength of resilience, and the enduring importance of fighting for freedom, even against overwhelming odds. She was not just free from Mr. Lee's grasp. She was truly empowered, a woman who had found her purpose in the crucible of adversity, turning her mathematical brilliance into a force for good. Her victory wasn't just personal. It was a quiet triumph for everyone who believed that even the darkest shadows could be overcome by light and logic.